Devotional Wednesday 22nd of July. It was a church with a healthy bank balance, but over the years the area in which it stood began to change. Population movements and socio-economic issues hit the area hard, but the church still maintained its presence, but those who attended had little in common with the people now living in the area. Homeless people could be found wandering the footpaths and the streets. The change made some members of the church very uncomfortable. They usually tried to avoid that part of town except on Sundays. One Sunday morning, shortly after arriving to serve in the church, a trainee pastor joined with the church members after the morning service for coffee and cakes. In the spring and summer months, they would gather in the flower garden outside the church among its gazebos, fountains and vine-covered arches. As the elegantly dressed worshippers sipped coffee and chatted in the garden, a homeless man shuffled in off the street. He entered through the garden gate without looking at anyone, but all eyes were certainly on him. He quietly walked over to the table where a spread of expensive buns were displayed on silver trays. He picked up one of the pastries and bit into it, keeping his eyes closed. Then he reached for a second and placed it into his coat pocket. Moving slowly and trying not to be noticed, he placed another in the same pocket. The garden buzzed with whispers. Finally, one of the elders walked over to the trainee pastor and said, "You've got to do something." Still feeling a little awkward in his new position, the young trainee handed his coffee to the man, walked over to the table and stood next to the homeless man. He reached under the table where the empty boxes for the pastries had been stored. Then he picked up one of the silver trays, loaded with pastries and emptied them into the box. He did the same with a second tray of expensive goodies. Then he closed the lids on the boxes and held them out to the homeless man. "We're here every Sunday," the young man said. The man smiled at the pastor, cradled the boxes in his arms and shuffled quietly out of the garden and down the street. The young pastor returned to his coffee and smiled at the elder and said, "That's what you meant when you said do something, wasn't it?" What would you have done if you'd been there? It's an important question for all of us to ask. Jesus looks at the homeless and the weak of this world and says to each of us, well, do something. If Jesus were here in the flesh, we can be sure he would have done something very much like what that young man did. But wait, Jesus is here in the flesh. That's what the church is all about. We are the body of Christ, the hands, the feet of Jesus in today's world.